Evelyn stood at the balcony of her family's castle, her hands resting lightly on the cold stone railing. The wind of the high valley whispered through the towers, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. Tonight, the royal court would gather for a grand feast, a celebration of alliances between kingdoms, clans, and noble houses. Evelyn's heart, however, was heavy, tied not to the pomp of royalty but to a gnawing unease she could not name. She adjusted the silk of her gown, a delicate blend of midnight blue and silver threads, and took a deep breath. Her fiancé, Lord Adrian, had chosen this night to finally speak before the court of their union. A union he called both honorable and necessary. Evelyn forced a smile for the mirror, but inside, a restless thought tugged at her. There is something coming, something I cannot yet see. The first notes of the lute drifted from the grand hall as courtiers began to arrive. Their voices carried greetings and polite flattery, but Evelyn barely heard them. Her mind kept wandering to the stories she had been told as a child, tales of the shadow wolves, a clan that roamed the forests beyond the northern ridges. The alpha of the clan, Kale, was said to be both feared and cursed, a man who could bend darkness itself to his will. She had dismissed these tales as legends until tonight. A sudden hush fell over the hall, sharp enough to make her heart skip a beat. Heads turned toward the main doors, and Evelyn's pulse quickened. Kale had arrived. He stepped in with a presence that seemed larger than life. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark cloak trailing like a shadow. He walked as though the hall belonged to him alone. His eyes, piercing and deep as the night, scanned the room with a predator's precision. The courtiers fell silent, murmuring under their breaths. No one dared challenge him. Not even Lord Adrian. Kale's gaze fell on Evelyn, and she felt an unexplainable pull, a weight in her chest she had never felt before. He was not just a man, he was a force of nature, a storm contained within human form. She stepped back instinctively, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. "Evelyn," Kale said, his voice low, smooth, and commanding. "You should not be here alone." Her cheeks burned with both fear and a strange thrill. How did he know her name? She opened her mouth to reply, but her voice caught in her throat. Lord Adrian, attempting to mask his own fear, stepped forward. "Kale, you have no right to." Kale's eyes flicked to him, and in that moment, Adrian's bravado vanished. He faltered, and the room seemed to hold its breath. With a simple gesture, Kale dismissed the man, and Adrian sank back as if the air itself had become too heavy for him. Evelyn's heart pounded. Who are you?" she whispered. "I am Kale," he replied. "Alpha of the shadow wolves. And tonight, I claim what fate has marked for me." Before she could respond, Kale moved closer, his shadow falling over her like the passing of twilight. A hush swept through the hall as he produced a small, intricately carved dagger, its blade glowing faintly with a blue flame. Evelyn's eyes widened in alarm. "This is," she began, but Kale interrupted. "Do not fear. You are mine," he said, the words sharp yet strangely reverent. Evelyn felt a strange warmth as he pressed the dagger lightly to her arm. The glow spread across her skin, not burning, but searing in a way that made her inhale sharply. Her body trembled not from pain, but from the power that radiated from the mark forming on her wrist. It was a brand unlike any she had ever seen, a twisting pattern of silver and shadow that pulsed faintly as if alive. Gasps filled the hall. Courtiers whispered and turned away, unable to watch, while some watched with awe and fear. Lord Adrian's face had gone pale. He stumbled backward, too shocked to speak. Evelyn's eyes met Kale's, and she saw no cruelty in him. Yet the weight of dominance, of claim, was undeniable. You cannot do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I am promised to—" Kale shook his head slowly. "Promises mean nothing in the face of destiny." His gaze softened, just a fraction, and she caught the faintest trace of regret in his eyes. This mark is not to harm you. It is to awaken what has always been within you. Her chest heaved. What does he mean? But the words barely reached her mind, lost in the whirlwind of fear and something else. Something dark, thrilling, and utterly consuming. He released her arm and stepped back, though the mark continued to glow faintly, a living promise etched into her skin. Evelyn staggered, nearly falling, and Cale reached out, steadying her with a firm grip. "You will come with me," he said. "No," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Something in her deep core stirred, whispering that resistance alone might not protect her. Lord Adrian finally found his voice, stepping forward with a mixture of courage and desperation. "Evelyn is promised to me. You cannot take her." Cale's expression darkened, and the air seemed to bend around him. The flickering torches cast shadows that danced like living creatures. With a motion so fluid it seemed like he moved through time itself, Cale blocked Adrian's path. He spoke a single word, and the room's tension became almost unbearable. "Step aside." Adrian's knees buckled, and he stumbled, humiliated. The courtiers gasped, some hiding their faces, some clutching their pearls or jewelry. Evelyn's own heartbeat pounded in her ears as she realized the truth. No one here could oppose KL. Not her fiancé. Not the nobility. Not even the king. Cale's grip on her arm tightened slightly, just enough to remind her of the power he held. "You are mine, Evelyn. Not because I desire you in the way men speak of desire. You are mine because fate has written it so, and I will see it fulfilled." Evelyn's mind raced. Mine? How can someone claim me like this? And yet, why do I feel that this is true? The thought terrified and intrigued her at once. The hall was a whirl of whispers, glances, and stifled gasps. Evelyn felt the weight of the eyes upon her, the humiliation of her fiancé, the shock of the nobles, but also the strange pull toward KL. He was both danger and salvation, fear and promise. Finally, KL released her and stepped back into the shadows. The glow of the brand faded slightly, but remained visible, a living symbol of what had begun. Evelyn's knees felt weak, and she had to grasp the edge of the balcony to steady herself. Cale's voice, low and echoing like the wind through the trees, reached her ears. "This is only the beginning. You cannot escape me now. The mark binds us. And soon, you will understand why." He turned, his cloak swirling around him, and disappeared into the night, leaving the court stunned, Adrian humiliated, and Evelyn trembling. For a moment, she wanted to call after him, to run, to scream, to resist. But the mark on her wrist throbbed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. It was alive. It was calling her, and deep down, she felt a spark, one she could not deny, that this encounter would change everything. That the life she had known, the life she had been promised, was gone, and that the Alpha, who had branded her, was more than just a man. He was a force she might not survive, and yet could not escape. As the wind howled through the towers, Evelyn clutched her wrist and whispered to herself, "What have I become? Mine, 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 mine." Outside the castle, in the shadows of the northern forest, Cale's eyes glimmered in the moonlight. He sensed the awakening in her, the power stirred by the mark. A faint smile crossed his lips, though his own heart carried the weight of curses, regrets, and battles yet to come. "This is only the beginning," he murmured to himself, "and she will either rise with me or fall by my side." The howl of wolves echoed from the forest, long and mournful, carrying with it a promise of danger, passion, and destiny intertwined. Evelyn's life had been claimed, yet the path ahead remained shrouded in mystery. The court would whisper of this night for generations, but the true story, the story of the bond between the cruel Alpha and the woman he had branded, was only just beginning. The forest seemed alive when Evelyn arrived at Cale's stronghold. Mist curled around the ancient trees like restless spirits, and shadows shifted unnaturally under the silver glow of the moon. She had never seen a place like this. The trees were taller than the castle towers, and the air was thick with the scent of pine, wet earth, and something faintly metallic like blood and iron. Cale led her through the winding paths with an ease that made her feel small and unsteady. His presence was constant, yet he spoke little, allowing the forest itself to guide them. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken at every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a wolf, and the subtle pressure of Cale's gaze. He was both terrifying and magnetic, a force she could neither resist nor fully understand. At last, they reached the stronghold. A fortress carved from black stone and entwined with ancient vines. The walls seemed to breathe, faintly pulsing, as if alive. Wolves, large and spectral, lingered at the edges of the clearing, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Evelyn's heart raced, torn between fear and awe. Cale finally spoke, his voice cutting through the mist like a knife. "This is where you will stay. Here, you will learn. The mark is more than a symbol, it is a key, and you have yet to discover the door it opens." Evelyn swallowed hard. "What do you mean? The mark? It burns sometimes. I feel something inside me I cannot explain." Cale's dark eyes softened for the briefest moment. "That is the beginning. The fire within you is tied to me, to the curse that binds me. You are stronger than you think, but you must decide whether to fight it or embrace it." For the first time since the court, Evelyn sensed vulnerability in him. The Alpha who had branded her was not just cruel and commanding. He carried a weight, a hidden sorrow, a loneliness carved by centuries. And yet, she could not ignore the fear that tightened her chest with every step he took. The days that followed were a trial of body and mind. Cale pushed her to learn the ways of survival in the cursed forest, teaching her to move silently among shadows, to sense the unseen, and to call upon the strange energy the mark had awakened. Evelyn discovered her senses sharpening. She could hear the faintest rustle of the leaves, see the shimmer of light that danced on the mist, and feel the subtle shift of magic in the air. Cale was a harsh teacher. He tested her endurance, forcing her to confront fears she had never known she carried. He exposed her to the mystical wolves, creatures of both flesh and spirit, who challenged her with their piercing gaze and unyielding strength. At times, she felt like a prisoner, trapped in a world she barely understood. Yet, amidst the harshness, there were moments that unsettled her heart. A hand lingered too long when he corrected her stance. A glance held a little too intensely. A rare, fleeting smile that left her breathless. Evelyn could not ignore the strange pull between them, a tension as thick as the forest mist. She hated it, yet she could not turn away. One evening, under the silver glow of a full moon, Cale called her to the clearing. "Tonight," he said, "you will confront the essence of your mark. You must face the power within you, or it will consume you." Evelyn's heart pounded. What will happen?" "You will see your true self," Cale replied. "And perhaps you will understand why we are bound together." The ritual began. Cale chanted in a language older than the mountains, and the mark on Evelyn's wrist began to glow brighter, spreading warmth through her veins. Her vision blurred, and she felt as if she were standing in a void filled with shadows that moved and whispered. In that darkness, Evelyn saw visions. Flashes of battles fought long ago, of wolves running through moonlit forests, of a man bound by a curse so heavy that it twisted his heart. She saw Cale, not as the fearsome Alpha she had met, but as a man trapped in time, seeking release, seeking redemption. Fear and longing intertwined in her chest. She wanted to run, to flee the visions. Yet a part of her clung to them, drawn to the pain and strength within Kale. She realized that the mark did not only belong to him, it was tied to her own destiny, a force that demanded courage and surrender. When the ritual ended, she collapsed to the forest floor, trembling. Kale knelt beside her, his strong hands steadying her. "You did well," he said quietly. "You are stronger than you know." Evelyn looked up at him, confusion and fear battling in her eyes. "Stronger? But why? Why me? Why us?" Kale's gaze darkened. "Because the curse chooses only what it cannot break. You are tied to me, not by choice, but by fate. Yet, in this bond, lies a chance for both of us to be free." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Evelyn felt a shiver run through her body, not from the cold, but from the weight of their connection. She could sense the desire, the danger, and the possibility of redemption all entwined in the alpha who had branded her. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn grew more attuned to the forest, to the wolves, and to her own powers. She discovered that she could sense Kale's emotions, anticipate his movements, and even feel the subtle shifts in his magical energy. The connection between them deepened, an invisible tether pulling their hearts and minds closer, though neither would admit it. Evelyn also learned of Kale's past fragmented stories whispered in the shadows of the forest. He had been cursed by a vengeful sorceress, condemned to live beyond the years of men, carrying the weight of centuries of guilt, loss, and unfulfilled desire. The brand he had given her was more than a mark, it was a bridge, a chance for both of them to confront their fears, their powers, and their hearts. One night, as the moon hung low and silver in the sky, the forest erupted in chaos. A group of rival clan warriors had tracked Evelyn, seeking to reclaim her for their own purposes. Their arrows cut through the mist like streaks of lightning. Evelyn froze, fear paralyzing her for the first moment in weeks. Kale's eyes blazed. "Move!" he commanded, and with a surge of power, he hurled himself into the path of the attack. The wolves followed, spectral and fierce, their growls shaking the trees. Evelyn felt the mark on her wrist burn, pulsing with a strange energy. Without thinking, she raised her hands, and a wave of light shot forth, knocking the attackers back. Kale's eyes widened, a mix of awe and fear crossing his face. You are more than I imagined," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Evelyn's chest heaved as adrenaline coursed through her. She had never felt power like this, raw and undeniable. And yet, it was frightening. She looked at Kale, seeing not the cruel alpha who had branded her, but the man who had believed in her strength before she had believed in it herself. As the last of the attackers fled, Kale approached her. His hands brushed hers as he steadied her. And for a heartbeat, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Evelyn's breath caught, and she felt a surge of something she could not name. Fear, desire, and a strange exhilaration all mixed into one. "You are no longer just mine," Kale said softly, his dark eyes searching hers. "You are something far greater." Evelyn stared at him, the weight of the words sinking in. She realized that the bond between them was no longer just about the mark, about fear or dominance. It was about power, trust, and an unspoken connection that neither could ignore. But even as she felt the pull toward him, a flicker of doubt crept in. What will this mean for my life, my family, my fiancé? The world she had known was gone, replaced by a reality where magic, power, and destiny ruled. And as if answering her fear, a wolf's howl echoed from the depths of the forest, long and mournful. It carried a warning and a promise. The outside world would not leave them in peace. Rival clans, kingdoms, and ancient forces would challenge them. Evelyn looked at Kale, and despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, she felt a spark of determination. She was no longer just a frightened noblewoman. She was tied to the Alpha, to the mark, and to a power she was only beginning to understand. Cale's gaze met hers, and the unspoken tension between them thickened. Their bond was no longer just a matter of fate, it was a challenge, a promise, and a test of trust. And as the moonlight bathed the forest, Evelyn realized that her journey with Cale had only just begun. The howl of the wolves echoed again. Closer this time, and Evelyn knew one thing with absolute certainty. The world outside was coming for them. And together, ADC, they would either rise or fall. The first light of dawn barely touched the treetops when Evelyn awoke, her wrist still tingling with the mark's faint glow. The forest was eerily quiet, a tense calm that foretold the storm to come. The events of the previous night, the ambush, the surge of her newfound power. The fear and exhilaration lingered in her mind like the echo of a half-forgotten dream. Kyle was already awake, standing at the edge of the clearing. His eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and vigilant, yet softer than she had ever seen them. He noticed her stirring and gave a brief nod, a gesture that was both reassurance and challenge. "We have little time," he said, the voice low. "The clans will not wait. They know the power that binds us." Evelyn struggled to her feet, gripping the cold hilt of a dagger Cale had given her for training. Her body ached from exertion and from the rush of her powers the night before. But within her, something had changed. Fear was no longer her master. She felt a strange confidence, a spark of control that had been dormant until Cale had awakened it. "We will fight together?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Kyle studied her, and for a moment, she saw the man behind the Alpha, the centuries of pain, loss, and the longing for freedom. "Yes," he said simply. "But you must remember, the power within you is both a gift and a weapon. Control it, or it will control you." The first signs of the approaching army appeared as shadows moving through the morning mist. Rival clans, long feuding and emboldened by rumors of the mark, advanced with arrows ready and banners raised. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she held Cale's gaze. Together, they stepped forward, the Alpha and the marked, bound by fate, trust, and an unspoken promise. The battle began with the wail of horns and the clash of steel. Wolves, ethereal and fierce, lunged from the shadows, scattering the enemy ranks. Cale moved like a tempest, every motion precise, every strike deliberate. Evelyn, feeling the mark's power surge within her, summoned waves of energy that knocked foes off their feet. Light and force, blending in a dance of survival. Amid the chaos, Evelyn caught sight of her fiancé, Lord Adrian, watching from the castle edge. Fear and disbelief etched into his face. She felt a pang of guilt and confusion, but the mark burned faintly, reminding her that her destiny was no longer her own. She was tied to Cale, to the power within her, and to the fight that would define their fates. The enemy pressed closer, arrows flying like deadly rain. Evelyn focused, calling forth the magic that flowed through her. Light shimmered from her hands, forming a protective barrier around her and Cale. The wolves moved in unison, sensing the bond between their Alpha and the woman he had branded. Together, they were a force no mere mortal could withstand. In the midst of battle, Cale was struck by an arrow, and Evelyn's heart seized. Without hesitation, she surged forward, her powers flaring in a brilliant display. The energy that had been awakening inside her now flowed freely, weaving through the battlefield like a storm of silver light. Arrows were deflected, warriors thrown back, and Cale's wound was shielded by a glowing force that radiated from Evelyn herself. He stared at her, awe and something deeper reflected in his eyes. "Evelyn, you are more than I imagined," he whispered, his voice raw with both pain and admiration. Breathless and trembling, Evelyn knelt beside him, her own fear mingling with exhilaration. For the first time, she saw him not just as the cruel Alpha who had branded her, but as the man beneath the one burdened by curses, bound by fate, yet willing to trust her with his life. "You saved me," he said quietly. "Not because I asked, but because you chose to." Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride, fear, and something more profound love, though she did not yet have the words for it. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his cheek, feeling the strength and scars beneath his skin. I could not let you die," she said softly. The battle raged on around them. But in that moment, time seemed to still. Their eyes met, unspoken understanding passing between them. Cale's hand found hers, the bond of the mark pulsing in harmony with their hearts. They were no longer alpha and marked. They were partners, bound by power, trust, and the forces that had drawn them together. As the sun rose higher, the rival clans began to falter. Their fear of the combined power of Cale and Evelyn, the wolves, and the mark's energy became undeniable. The last of the attackers retreated into the forest, their banners torn, their pride shattered. Evelyn and Cale stood together, breathing heavily, their connection now unbreakable. Cale's gaze softened as he looked at her, a rare vulnerability shining through his dark eyes. "You have surpassed all expectations," he said. "The mark, it chose well, and so did I." Evelyn felt a shiver run through her, not from the cold, but from the weight and intensity of his words. I don't fully understand all of this," she admitted. "The power, the mark, you, but I want to try. With you." Cale stepped closer, the forest around them quiet and watching. "Then we will face the future together. Whatever comes, whatever tries to challenge us, we face it as one." The wolves gathered around them, their eyes gleaming with recognition and loyalty. Evelyn's hand still glowed faintly, the mark resonating with Cale's presence. She realized that she had changed. No longer was she the frightened noblewoman who had been branded in front of a court. She was a woman who had faced fear, embraced her power, and chosen a bond that transcended fear and domination. But as relief settled in, a new tension crept in, the knowledge that their victory was only temporary. The rival clans would return, kingdoms would stir, and whispers of the mark's power would spread like wildfire. Evelyn and Cale had survived together, but the world beyond the forest would test them again. Cale's hand found her shoulder, steadying her as she looked toward the horizon. "You are mine," he said, echoing the words of that first night, but now with a different meaning. Not in fear, not in cruelty, but because together we are stronger than the world itself. Evelyn's heart raced. The words, once terrifying, now carried promise and strength. She nodded, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with magic, but everything to do with trust and choice. "Then we stand together," she whispered. The forest seemed to sigh around them, the morning mist lifting, revealing the path ahead. They had survived the night. But destiny was never simple. The mark pulsed on Evelyn's wrist, a reminder of power, bond, and the unknown challenges that awaited them. Cale's gaze softened once more. "We have a future, Evelyn, but it will not be easy. You must learn, and I must let go of what I once feared. Only then can we truly be free." She took his hand, feeling the pulse of their connection. "Then we will learn. Together." They will learn. Together. As they moved back toward the stronghold, the howl of the wolves echoed across the forest. It was not a warning this time, but a song of victory, of survival, and of the bond that had been forged in fire and shadow. Evelyn knew that the mark was not a chain, but a bridge between fear and strength, cruelty and redemption, isolation and love. And though the world outside the forest waited, dangerous and uncertain, Evelyn felt a fierce certainty in her heart. She was no longer merely a pawn in a game of power and politics. She was a partner, a force awakened, and bound to the Alpha, who had branded her not with cruelty alone, but with the promise of transformation, protection, and something deeper than either of them had yet dared to name. Kale looked at her as they stepped into the fortress, the early light catching in his eyes, and whispered softly, "You are mine. Yes. But together, we are unstoppable." Evelyn met his gaze, a smile forming despite exhaustion and fear. "Then let them come," she said. "Whatever the world throws at us, we face it together." The forest stood silent, watching, as the two of them entered the fortress, bound by mark, power, and choice. Outside, the morning breeze carried the scent of pine, magic, and the promise of battles yet to come. But inside, a bond had been sealed. A bond that neither time nor fate could undo. The story of the cruel Alpha and the woman he had branded had reached a turning point. Fear had given way to trust, dominance to partnership, and despair to hope. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time, Evelyn understood that the mark was not the end of her freedom, it was the beginning of their shared destiny. And the forest, ancient and wise, whispered its approval, carrying the echo of a new legend, one of fire, shadow, love, and redemption.